afternoon. This is Julie Rendelman. I'm here. I'm going to be your host for the next 2 hours. Let's get back into the courtroom. We're following the McStay trial. We have Sergeant Armando Avila on the stand. Let's take a look. And it looks like they're getting their cross-examination together, and we're just going to take a moment to speak to Ann Bremner, who's been with us, I think, for a couple hours. I think, Ann, you were here before I even got here. Thank you for sticking around to talk with us.
My pleasure.
So, you know, obviously we're hearing from these witnesses, and I think today's not necessarily a day that's really making any headway with regards to Mr. Merritt being the person that committed this crime. However, I think, you know I was a former prosecutor. This is evidence that has to come out. The jury has to hear it to kind of make an understanding for the jury as to the background as to how these victims were found. But it's still needed. You agree with me?
Well, absolutely. It's kind of like the tortoise and the hare. I mean, slow and steady wins the race for a prosecutor. They need to put their case together, and I was a prosecutor too, as you know. Brick by brick, step by step. It's like a jigsaw puzzle with pieces coming together, we used to say. Or, you know, the foreword to a book talking about the various chapters, maybe you're opening, and then you lay it out piece by piece and systematically during the course of the trial. The jury needs to know about the scene of the homicides. The jury needs to know where were the bones, where was the sledgehammer, all the kinds of things that put together the entire piece, even though that evidence doesn't necessarily point to mistake, or excuse me, to the defendant.
Okay, and thank you, Ann. And I want to apologize that the detective on the stand is Detective Gary Hart, and we're just going to head back into the courtroom to listen to the cross-examination. And that is cross-examination. It looks like they're having the detective, Gary Hart, review his paperwork in regards to some of the information as to the actual crime scene where the bodies of Joseph McStay and his brother and his 2 children and wife were found. I'm just going to bring Ann Bremner in for a moment while the detective reviews his notes. And one of the issues that came up in this case and is going to come up is that the tire tracks of at least one of the vehicles that appears to have come or gone from that location may match the tire tracks of Mr. Merritt's, which is obviously good for the prosecution. But one does, you know, on the other hand, wonder how many tires have those same tire tracks. You know, and so, you know, it's certainly not DNA evidence that we're talking about when we refer to that.
No, it's not even close. And so it's just like, you know, oh, the tire tracks. So, you know, I had to explain to this person. It's good circumstantial evidence, you know, with other more weighty evidence. But it's not, it's like the way we used to look at hairs and things like that years ago. I mean, it's something consistent, but not dispositive.
Yeah, it's certainly not going to be something that's going to weigh that heavily. We're going to head on back into the courtroom where they're continuing cross-examination. And it looks like they're doing something, but they're not speaking right now. So I'm going to ask some questions to Ann Bremner, who's thankfully with us for the next couple hours. And, you know, we have some cross-examination where it looks like it reminds me a little bit of the O.J. Simpson trial, where the defense attorneys are literally tearing apart every single bit of testimony from each witness, especially those witnesses that relate to the forensic aspect of this case. Is that effective, not effective, or time will tell? Can you tell us that?
Well, yeah, great minds think alike. I was thinking the exact same thing. It was just like O.J. Simpson. And remember the cross-examination of Dennis Fung, the criminalist? Every time they showed him down, well, I was like, what about that, Mr. Fung, with Barry Shack? And,
exactly. Reminds me of yeah, exactly.
So it's all coming back. But yeah, is it effective? You bet, if you've got the right approach like they did in O.J. Simpson. I mean, it was like surgical. It was so well done in terms of each item of evidence. And then to get on video when Dennis Fung didn't have a glove on his hand, or he picked up something, you know, without proper procedures, that's the way you win one of these, which is don't trust the message. If you don't trust the messenger, contaminated, compromised, inadmissible.
Yeah, and that's, you know, look, I think he's doing it. It's long, and so therefore it's a little painful, but I think he's doing an effective job of, you know, taking apart witness by witness and questioning the investigation. Because remember, even when we talked, when one of the detectives took the stand, we found that he wasn't even effective in terms of the job they did in the house. Now we're at the scene where the dead bodies are found. We want them to be as careful and precise as humanly possible. And it seems that, again, they're raising doubts for the jury as to whether or not they did an accurate and perfect forensic examination. If they didn't do it right there, how's the jury going to go with the prosecutor's theory that they have the right guy?
Right. It undermines the entire case. I mean, forensics is everything, especially in these days with forensic files and everything else on television. If you don't have that foundation, as you well know, the case can be over, just like O.J. Simpson, a long time ago, but it still bears to be true right now in this case.
Yeah, and it really says a lot about the two of us that we're both thinking the same thing. We're going to head back into the courtroom. It looks like they are back with the cross-examination of Detective Gary Hart. And they're going to take their afternoon break. Detective Gary Hart appears to still be on the stand in what looks like to be re-cross-examination. And I want to bring in Ann Bremner, if I can, just to comment a little bit about what we see happening. And basically what we've heard so far is Detective Gary Hart is on the stand. He's a homicide detective who went to the scene where the victims' graves were eventually dug up and took notes of where the various bones, clothing, and the sledgehammer was recovered. And there's been a plethora of questions by the defense on cross-examination initially about where items were found, whether or not the notes he had matched the diagram, and the depths of the various items. And it seems that back on redirect, the prosecutor tried to clean up perhaps what he viewed as the detective's failures to clarify some things, and marked up one of the items that seemed to upset the defense attorney an awful lot. Because when the defense attorney came back, he came back with fire and brought out what appears to be a new diagram, because he wanted to make sure that the prosecutor was not misleading the jury, and ended up with a whole bunch of sustained objections for throwing in some of little comments before he asked these questions. And I guess, long story short, again, unless there's DNA and that DNA establishes Charles Merritt as somehow being at that scene, which I don't think that we're going to have any DNA. As we talked about the case of the O.J. Simpson case, where it's clear that, the attack was for the very purpose of going after the DNA, which was at the heart of the case. It's interesting, and it certainly will bring an issue. But, what are your thoughts as to whether or not they're getting anywhere?
Matter, of course, the defense comes back with a vengeance, with their own diagram, with everything that's appropriate and proper and accurate. And even if it's pretty hard for a prosecutor, to get up on redirect or redirect and say, okay, you weren't right? This was inaccurate, right? Let's do a diagram and show how you were wrong with your own witness. So that's why the defense came back so strongly, because that was effective and had to be done. So at the end of the day, undermine that forensic evidence, even if it's not like they had in the O.J. case, and even if you don't have the kind of errors in the O.J. case. This witness, on balance, I felt was very damaged. He had to admit to a lot of inaccuracies with the prosecuting attorney, and he seemed to be kind of tired and a little bit sheepish with the defense at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree with you. We're going to head on back into the courtroom. I think Claudia Horg is on the stand. Let's take a look. And that's earlier today, Claudia Herrig, who's testifying on her own behalf in the murder of her husband, Carl Herrig. I want to just bring in Ann Bremner. Ann, do you think it was a good idea to put her on the stand? Yes, no, and why?
No, I think she's just, I don't even know where to start and where to end. I think she's just one thing after another. I'm the victim and all these things. It's not credible, and didn't like stretch marks with the other wife. So there's no sex. I'm like, oh my God, I mean, it's just stop already. And of course, she's the one that fled to Brazil and had to be extradited. So,
yeah,
no.
Yeah, no, I hate to make light of this, but it's hard when you're listening to her testify. So let's take a break. We'll be right back. And that was the direct testimony of Claudia Herrig. I want to just ask Ann Bremner a quick question before we go to break. Ann, this is a woman that's testifying on her own behalf, and one of the comments she made is when she didn't like what her husband said, she'd say, "Talk to the hand." And she did that several times. Is she making herself out to be the victim? Because she certainly seems pretty tough up there, and if she wants to make out some type of self-defense claim, I don't know if she's doing a very good job of it.
I know. Well, it was actually like in words, she's trying to say she's a victim, but in action, she's not. I mean, the fact of the matter is she is tough, and she describes all this very forcefully and everything else. The thing when she talked about, like, she had to walk around naked in the high heels, and he's doing the swinger thing, and there's all these other people, it's almost like they called central casting and forgot to give her the script. You know what I mean? She's saying all of the things you might see in a case like this. Not just one or two, but everything.
Yeah, no. She's leaving absolutely nothing out. It's like she's made up the script, and I always wonder what the defense counsel looks like when he's asking these questions, if his head is down or he's looking up.
Right, like that, right?
Absolutely. We're going to take a break, and hopefully the McStay trial will be back in live testimony. And that is, again, Claudia Herrig talking about the relationship between herself and Carl Herrig at the time prior to his eventual shooting death. Ann Bremner, I want to bring you in for a few minutes or for a short question. And the question I have is that, when you listen to her testify, and I think we both chuckle just because some of it sounds a bit outlandish. And when I say outlandish, one wonders if there might be some type of mental illness, and if so, is there a mental illness that might have assisted the defense attorney in making out a mental illness case instead of a self-defense kind of battered syndrome case?
Right. I mean, and I don't want to denigrate the imperfect self-defense defense. My ex-husband had the first battered woman syndrome case in my state in Seattle, and I think these are important defenses in certain circumstances for anybody that's abused and meets the criteria. That having been said, the problem she's got is she's got to, like on insanity, she's got to talk about whether she knows right from wrong and the nature and quality of her act, her capacity. Really tough road to hoe for a defense attorney. So they're kind of left with this. I mean, it's not like she was holding up a telephone pole with a banana. I mean, she shot, she killed her husband. So, and there was a real history there.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. I think that any type of mental illness defense would have been a tough haul. But, unfortunately, the defense is stuck with what they have, and they have Claudia Herrig, and they have her testimony, who's the only person that can really defend what she did on that day. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll be right back. And that's the testimony of Claudia Herrig talking about after the shooting death of her husband, Carl Herrig. She's on the phone with her father, who is, quote unquote, directing her to get on a plane to Brazil. And I'll tell you one thing that bothers me. I hate that she blames her father for her criminal activity. It really, it stands out to me. I'm not sure if I was the prosecutor, I'd certainly be summing on that. It really bothers me that she takes no responsibility.
Right. I'm with you 110%. And the fact is, we know evidence flight is evidence of guilt, and there'll be a jury instruction to that effect. So, so she's trying to neutralize that. But of all the people, her own dad, who's just trying to help her, I think that's pretty despicable. And she's been blaming everybody all over the place. But don't blame her.
Yeah, no, and I think I agree, and I think one of the things she talks about is that after the shooting, that she is originally the reason that the shooting happens is because she intends to kill herself in the first place. I find it interesting, and again, falling right into the prosecutor's hand, that not only does she not kill herself at the end, but she ends up with another body in front of her, and then she flees, and she's perfectly alive and well now, so she didn't commit the suicide she had planned to, which I think, to me, indicates to the jury that she had the wherewithal to make some pretty amazing decisions to protect herself when it came to getting away with murder.
Well, exactly. And then she talked at one point about, will suicide mean I go to hell? There's that little aside, but she tried 3 times, she says. But, lo and behold, she's in a situation where her husband's staring at her. He's been mean, he's this and that. And, she's said all kinds of bad things about him. But then what did he really do, to deserve to be killed in the way he was? Of course, shot in the head and in the back, but that's a whole nother story. But she hasn't really explained.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And one wonders if she really was trying to kill herself each time. When we try to shoot ourselves, usually we're successful. And so I question whether these were cries for attention or actual attempts at suicide.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think she's basically playing the victim there too, which is I really was going to kill myself. And I tried all these different ways. It just didn't work. And then I had no choice but to do what I did because of the circumstances I was in, married to this beast, so to speak. And, and she's almost just watching her. She's just
I'm going to have to just interrupt you for a moment because we have to take a quick break and we'll come back and talk more. Thank you so much. We'll be back.